Every day, some of the largest machines ever built move through a strip of water narrow enough to see land on both sides. They're oil tankers, sometimes longer than 3 football fields, carrying enough energy to keep entire countries moving. Their destination may be China, India, Japan, South Korea, or Europe. But first, they have to pass Iran. The Strait of Hormuz connects the Persian Gulf to the open ocean. At its narrowest point, it's roughly 21 miles across. And inside that space, commercial ships are organized into 2 shipping lanes, each only about 2 miles wide with a buffer between them. A tanker can weigh hundreds of thousands of tons, but inside this corridor, that size becomes a weakness. It can't turn or stop quickly, and it can't quietly choose another route. A few mines, a missile battery, a swarm of small boats, or even a convincing threat can force shipping companies, naval commanders, insurers, and oil traders to make decisions before anyone knows whether an attack is actually coming. That's what makes Hormuz dangerous. The strait doesn't have to close to shake the global economy. The world only has to believe it could. And to understand why, start with the map. The Persian Gulf looks like a long basin with a narrow opening at the end. Around that basin sit some of the most productive oil fields on Earth: Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. Together, these countries produce enormous quantities of oil and natural gas. But much of that energy can't reach international markets without first leaving the Gulf. And for most ships, there's only one exit: Hormuz. In 2024, around 20 million barrels of oil and petroleum products passed through the strait every day. That was roughly 1/5 of the global petroleum consumption and more than 1/4 of all oil traded by sea. Around 1/5 of the world's liquefied natural gas trade also passed through, much of it leaving Qatar. This isn't simply a regional shipping lane, it's one of the main arteries of the industrial world. But the countries facing the greatest direct risk aren't necessarily the ones people expect. The United States once depended heavily on Persian Gulf oil. Today, it produces far more oil at home and imports large amounts from Canada. Also in 2024, the Persian Gulf crude passing through Hormuz accounted for only a small share of the total American petroleum consumption. Asia carries much more of that direct risk today. Around 84% of the oil moving through Hormuz in 2024 was headed toward Asian markets. China, India, Japan, and South Korea were the largest destinations. That means a serious disruption would first hit refineries, utilities, manufacturers, airlines, and transportation systems thousands of miles east of the strait. But oil is traded in a global market. A barrel sent to Shanghai affects the price of a barrel sold in Rotterdam, Houston, or Mumbai. When supply becomes uncertain in one place, buyers everywhere begin competing for what remains. That's how a confrontation with Iran can reach a gas station in your state or country, even when not one tanker involved was headed there. And geography is only the beginning. Hormuz is often described as 21 miles wide. Now, technically, that doesn't mean ships are being squeezed through a 21-mile wide concrete hallway. Parts of the strait are wider, and much of the water is easy to navigate. The real restriction is the organized traffic system. Large ships follow designated inbound-outbound lanes. Each lane is roughly 2 miles wide, with another 2-mile separation zone between them. The structure keeps tankers from wandering randomly through one of the busiest waterways on Earth, but it also makes their movements predictable. A tanker approaching Hormuz can't hide where it's going. Its speed is limited, its route is visible, and its cargo may be worth tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars. All of this is happening close to a country that spent decades studying how to challenge more powerful enemies without matching them ship for ship. The United States operates aircraft carriers, destroyers, submarines, satellites, and advanced aircraft. Iran can't build a mirror image of that force, so it built something different: coastal missiles, naval mines, drones, diesel submarines, and fast patrol boats. Those weapons weren't necessarily designed to defeat the United States Navy in a traditional battle. They were designed to make the water around Iran expensive, confusing, and dangerous. A fast boat is almost nothing compared with a supertanker, and that's precisely the point. A tanker's crew can't assume that a small approaching vessel is harmless. It could be watching, it could be carrying armed personnel, it could be directing another weapon, or it could simply be testing how the crew and nearby naval forces respond. The uncertainty itself becomes the weapon. Iran has used that uncertainty repeatedly. During the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, both sides attacked commercial shipping in what became known as the Tanker War. Iraq tried to weaken Iran by striking ships serving Iranian oil terminals. Iran responded by targeting vessels connected to Iraq's supporters in the Gulf. Tankers were hit by missiles, ships were damaged by mines. Crews sailed through waters where a commercial voyage could suddenly become part of a war. Kuwait eventually asked foreign powers to protect its shipping. The United States responded by placing Kuwaiti tankers under the American flag and escorting them through the Gulf. The mission was supposed to demonstrate control. Then, on the very first escorted voyage in July of 1987, the tanker Bridgerton struck a mine. The explosion tore into the ship's hull. The tanker survived, but the image was hard to ignore. American warships were present. American power was visible. Yet the enormous tanker had been wounded by a weapon hidden beneath the surface, one that may have cost only a tiny fraction of the ship it damaged. The escort ships then moved behind Bridgerton, allowing the damaged tanker's reinforced hull to lead the way through the suspected minefield. For a moment, the ship being protected had become the protection for the Navy. The lesson wasn't that Iran could permanently defeat the United States at sea. The lesson was that keeping a narrow waterway open is harder than threatening it. A mine doesn't have to sink every ship. It only has to prove that the next ship might get hit. In April of 1988, the American frigate USS Samuel B. Roberts struck another Iranian mine. The blast nearly broke the vessel in two and injured 10 sailors. The United States responded with Operation Praying Mantis, destroying Iranian naval vessels and offshore platforms in one of the largest American surface engagements since the Second World War. Militarily, the message was clear. Iran could be punished severely, but economically, another message had already been delivered. A relatively cheap landmine had damaged a sophisticated warship and triggered a major military response. That imbalance still defines Hormuz. Iran doesn't need to control the sea in the traditional sense. It only needs the ability to raise the cost of using it. And that cost begins long before oil stops moving. Suppose you own a tanker scheduled to enter the Persian Gulf. Reports begin to emerge that a commercial vessel has been boarded. A drone has appeared near another ship. Navigation signals are being jammed. Officials are exchanging threats. Your captain may be still willing to sail, but now your insurer has questions. Marine insurance covers the ship, the cargo, the crew, and the financial consequences if something goes wrong. In dangerous regions, insurers can charge additional war risk premiums. As the perceived danger rises, those premiums can rise with it. The crew may demand additional compensation. The vessel may need a security plan. The company may delay its departure, change its schedule, or refuse the cargo altogether. Oil traders see those decisions and begin pricing in the possibility of shortages. Buyers rush to secure future supplies before the price climbs even higher. That buying pushes prices up now. This is why the threat of disruption can become economically real even when the physical disruption remains limited. In June of 2025, after regional tensions increased, crude oil jumped by several dollars per barrel in a single day. Even though traffic through Hormuz had not been blocked, the barrels were still moving, but the fear moved faster. And once oil prices rise, the effect spread outward. Diesel becomes more expensive to produce. Ships and trucks cost more to operate. Airlines face higher fuel bills. Chemical companies pay more for petroleum-based materials. Farmers pay more to run machinery and transport crops. Eventually, consumers may see the difference in gasoline, airline tickets, deliveries, food, and manufactured goods. The strait works less like an on-off switch and more like a pressure point. The harder it's pressed, the more those costs move through the system. That raises an obvious question. Why hasn't the world built a way around it? Some alternatives do exist. Saudi Arabia operates an east-west pipeline capable of moving crude oil from fields near the Persian Gulf to the Red Sea coast. The United Arab Emirates has a pipeline leading to Fujairah outside the strait. Together, available spare pipeline capacity could reroute a few million barrels per day during an emergency. That matters, but it's nowhere close to the roughly 20 million barrels of oil and petroleum products that normally move through Hormuz. Pipelines also have fixed starting points and fixed destinations. They can't instantly collect every grade of oil from every Gulf producer. Some are already being used during normal operations. Others may face their own limits involving security, maintenance, or capacity. Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, and Bahrain remain heavily dependent on the maritime exit. Qatar faces a special problem. It's one of the world's largest exports of liquefied natural gas. LNG is natural gas cooled until it becomes a liquid, allowing it to be carried in specialized ships. Qatar's export facilities sit inside the Persian Gulf. A pipeline can help move crude oil around Hormuz. It can't easily replace the fleet of LNG tankers leaving Qatar. The world has created a partial escape route for some oil. It hasn't created a replacement for the strait. Completely closing Hormuz would also hurt Iran. Iran exports its own oil through the same waterway. Its economy depends on regional trade. A sustained closure could provoke a military response, damage relations with important customers such as China, and threaten neighboring states that Iran may want to influence rather than destroy. That creates the central contradiction. Hormuz gives Iran leverage because so many countries depend on it, but using that leverage too aggressively could damage Iran itself. That's why the strait is most powerful as a threat, not fully open and not fully closed either. Just dangerous enough that every government, captain, insurer, and trader has to think about what might happen next. The United States Navy and allied forces remain in the region partly to prevent the uncertainty from turning into control. Their presence resumes commercial shipping and warns that attacks may carry a heavy price. But warships can't remove geography. They can't make a tanker faster. They can't make a tanker turn faster. They can't inspect every patch of water instantly. They can't prevent markets from reacting to rumors. And they can't guarantee that a small confrontation will remain small. A patrol boat approaches too closely, a captain misunderstands a radio's warning, a drone is mistaken for an incoming weapon, a mine damages a ship. Each side believes the other acted deliberately. The danger isn't only a planned closure, it's a chain of decisions that creates one by accident. And that may be the deeper reason these 21 miles matter. The modern economy appears global, digital, and almost weightless. Money crosses borders in seconds. Traders buy oil through screens. Factories operate through automated supply systems. But beneath all of it, physical things still have to move through physical places. Oil has to leave the Gulf. Ships have to follow the lanes. Crews have to accept danger. And the entire system has to trust that tomorrow's passage will look enough like today's for everything to keep moving. Hormuz exposes the hidden bargain behind the globalization. Efficiency comes from concentrating production, infrastructure, and transportation along those routes that work best. But concentration creates vulnerability. The same narrow passage that makes Gulf energy easy to export also makes that energy easier to threaten. So the Strait of Hormuz doesn't hold the global economy hostage because Iran can simply close the gate. There is no gate. Its power comes from something more unsettling. 20 million barrels a day move through because millions of people assume the route will remain usable. The moment that assumption breaks, the economic damage begins, long before the last tanker disappears over the horizon.